So, I've not mastered life, yet for some reason, I think I can. My name is Brandon, and I've wanted nothing more than to be a husband and a father. Now a husband and a father, I realize how terrible I am at it. And not just at that, but life in general. I'm currently a seminary student working towards a doctorate, but I don't want to be a pastor, nor do I want to teach at a seminary. I honestly don't know what I want to do, but I like writing and podcasting. So I'm going to take this step of faith and put myself out there. So listen and laugh with or at me as I attempt to endure life's constant slap upside the head, from calling out my wife on her BS to being guilty of the same thing. I'll be discussing a range of topics about life in order to have genuine talks about our screw-ups. The goal is to grow and mature while having some fun in between. Join the conversation every month with people from different walks of life to discuss how we're doing it wrong. Life better.
Money be the worst. Be your equal. See the people wait before the purse. Doing it.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of You Doing It Wrong. My name is Brandon, and I'm glad to be back another month. Last month, me and my brothers Keith and Jeremy, we were talking about relationships. I was excited to have that conversation with them. I appreciate just their candor, their openness, their vulnerableness, just to have such a conversation as that. So if you haven't had an opportunity, please check it out. Available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and the visuals are up on YouTube as well. But towards the end of that conversation that we had, my brother Keith had a challenging question for me. He says, we're having a conversation about relationships, but you don't have any ladies to talk about it. And so the reason I didn't have any ladies to talk about it, because and having these conversations about you're doing it wrong, I was trying to come from a nuanced position and have conversations that many people aren't already having. And I think relationships, just in my opinion, it was dominated coming from a woman's perspective, and I thought it would be nice to have it from a male perspective. But as Keith and other people have reminded me, it's probably important to get other perspectives as well. So I can admit when I'm doing it wrong, and I did not plan this at all, but I'm grateful for it, and I'm grateful that I have my sisters here who are willing to have the conversation, because it can be an awkward conversation, especially having it with just other people. But I'm glad their willingness to come aboard and just have the conversation about relationships. So I'm grateful to be here with my sisters, Lizzie and Tova. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Great. Yeah.
Good. Are you, and like I said, thank y'all for being so willing to come and do this, because it's weird having to approach someone, because, you know, the potential of rejection of like, hey, you know, they may not want to do this, especially talking about such a sensitive topic as this. But I wanted to have real conversations and talk about things and just be open and vulnerable with them, because we don't always get them right all the time, especially when it comes to relationships. And that's kind of how I wanted to start this off. When I originally approached Lizzie, she was telling me that, hey, she was having a conversation with some of her friends about relationships and how this is a topic that dominates, you know, their lives. But why is it such a topic that dominates the majority of our lives, talking about relationships?
I mean, I think it's because we're just wired that way. It's in our DNA from birth. Even scientifically, we crave a relationship with our parents, siblings, if siblings are in the picture, other kids, like you watch babies play with other babies. So I think it's just from birth that's there.
Would you say there's a reason why that is? So it just essentially you're saying it's innate?
Yeah. So I mean, I believe that God is the creator of everything, and the whole reason humanity exists is because he created us for community with him, in relationship with him. So if we're made, and you'll hear it like in the image of God, if we're made in the image of God, it makes sense for us to be made like he is in craving that relationship.
What are your thoughts on Tova?
I definitely agree that it's something that's in us, that God put in us when He designed us. And I think about that song, I forgot the name of it, but it basically says, like a bride waiting for her groom. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think, like, one reason why, you know, women want, you know, that relationship with a man, because it's symbolic of, like, our relationship with God. And so, yeah.
So what would you say, because this is what I was trying to challenge Keith and Jeremy with. So I understand that we come from a biblical worldview, but those who may be watching may not. Mm-hmm. And so what would be their foundation for a relationship? So how will we, even though I know it's kind of hard because we share biblical worldviews, but for those who say, I don't believe the Bible, I don't believe this, that, and the third, how will we respond to them? Because whether you believe in God or you don't, relationships are everywhere, but what is the foundation for that if you're not a believer?
I would say evolution is probably the answer. Usually that comes up. I mean, whether you believe in microevolution or evolution or just strictly adaptation, you're going to have changes over time, right? So there's altruism where you, like, the parent would sacrifice for the child in order for the population to continue to increase. Mm-hmm. So it would be wired in your brains. I think that would be the answer for that. And I agree. I just think God is responsible for it.
Okay. What about you?
So make sure I had the question right. You're asking, like, for someone who's not a believer, why do they desire a relationship?
Yeah, so and I guess what I'm arguing, just full disclosure, that you would have to come from a biblical worldview to truly understand relationships, because if you're not coming from that worldview, what is the basis of your, I guess you would just say tradition, what's been passed down to me, but I wouldn't think that is sufficient, because then we can set what we want a relationship to be, and that's kind of what we see in our society today, that a relationship can be what I so desire it to be, that I can be in a relationship where it's not, I don't have to commit to this individual. I can be in a relationship with, and I don't want to go too far down the road, but I can be in a relationship with someone of the same sex, or I can be in a relationship with multiple individuals. And so if we're not slaying the foundation of where relationships come from and why they are, then we just do what we want. And I think the end result comes to a society which we see now where commitment to somebody else is not a premium. And if we don't start with the biblical basis that God is in a committed relationship with us and we're to reflect that, then I can just be with anybody and there's no commitment to it. And we see, you know, how that degrades the family system from top to bottom. So if we don't get what's going on in Genesis, we see the family unit just decay. So I guess what I'm asking is if someone doesn't come from that worldview, then what would they say? Because at the end of the day, like I was telling them earlier, where I didn't necessarily want this to be like an overtly Christian podcast, but I want people to think critically. So if you're someone out there who doesn't believe in the Bible, and clearly you talk about relationships, you can't go anywhere without TV, music, everywhere is talking about relationships, but what's your standard of a relationship? Because a lot of times, and like I said, when we had the conversation before, even though I know some time has passed, towards the end of the conversation, we were talking about the surviving R. Kelly thing. And so we see broken relationship, but that comes from what? There's no foundation set. What, like you said, we're made in the image of God. So if that's not my foundation, then I can just degrade a woman any way that I want. But I think that's what happens when you don't start from that foundation, that God is a relational being and desires us to be in relationship with him. So if you don't start from that paradigm, then I can just make any rules that I want. And so, like I said, when having a conversation, I just wanted to make sure that we are laying that a foundation. So hopefully those who are listening again can just think critically about it. But I did have one question, especially for you, Tova. So we've had interactions, but we haven't had just anything in depth. So I don't know anything about your upbringing. Did you grow up in a two-parent household? Did you have brothers and sisters? How was that for you? Because I think that is where we first see a relationship, especially with our parents, and it affects how we go out and go through relationships in our daily lives. So how was that growing up for you and your relationships with your parents and your upbringing?
No. Before I answer that, can I answer like your first one?
Go ahead, sorry.
So I think, like, at our core, like, as human beings, we don't want to be alone, and we want to be loved, and that's one reason why we desire a relationship. And I think our basis for that, if it's not coming from a biblical standpoint, is looking around us. What do we see? Even, like, what do we see in nature? Like, a lot of animals, like, they're usually not alone, or, like, they end up flocking together at some point if they are alone. But, like, you go out on the street, you go to the store, you look on TV, you see people in relationships, you see celebrities in relationships, and so it's like one of those comparison things, like, oh, this person has this many friends, I want this, or, oh, this person has a wife, you know, I want this. So, and then just to talk about me, so from Jacksonville, North Carolina, the 910, not Fayetteville. And I am one of 3 girls.
Oh, wow.
I'm the youngest. So my older sister, she's 13 years older than me. And then the next sister, my middle sister, she's 11 years older than me.
Oh, so you're the baby.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so what that meant was basically when I was in elementary school, that's when they were, like, in college. So I was pretty much the only child, essentially. I had both parents in the home. Both worked. Dad works on cars. Mom works at a middle school as a receptionist. And I say my mom was more so involved in things. Like, she was always going to my games because I did sports. She was at award ceremonies and all that. And I gotta say, like, not that my dad was in the picture, he was. It's just, like, I wish he was at those things too to show that he loved me. And so I think, like, relationship-wise, several of my relationships, I was really looking for the attention of man, like, finding my worth in that, like, the attention he was giving me, because I really wasn't getting that from, like, my dad. So, does that answer your question?
No, it does. How was their interaction with each other?
They like each other. I don't want to throw my parents under the bus.
Well, I guess I'll say, how did their relationship affect you?
It definitely taught me a lot of things. Sacrifice, like, you know, just because someone's not doing their part in the marriage doesn't mean the other person doesn't do their part. And so I definitely saw that on one parent's side. My parents have been married for a while, and what they have, I guess, works. But as far as, like, looking at their relationship, I really looked at my middle sister's marriage as, like, an example. She's happily married. I don't know how long they've been together, but they have a son who's, how old is he going to be, 7 soon? So they've been married for a while.
So did your parents' relationship encourage you or discourage you from wanting to pursue it yourself? Or was it more of your sisters that was the example that you showed, and was that what you wanted to possibly model after?
I think, you know, my parents' relationship, I still wanted that desire. I think was more so from a, like, I just desire that relationship with the man, like the worth issue I was talking about earlier. But I would say my sister's relationship with her husband definitely motivated me to go throughout that process and to look at marriage a different way. So, like, one example, my sister, you know, when she got taken, she was like MIA, and I just never understood, like, why. But then over time I realized, you know, once you are married, like, you leave, like, your old life and you become one with this other person. So you're not going to be at every, like, holiday function, or, you know, you might have to be at, you know, this commitment because your husband needs this support. And so I think that was good to see.
What about you, Lizzie, growing up, with seeing that example? Was it, and again, I don't want to throw your parents under the bus, was it a healthy environment? Was it something that encouraged you, hey, I want to pursue what my parents had? Or was it more of a deterrent for you? And how was that like growing up?
I have loved watching my parents. They are like unicorns. I mean, they fight, they have their arguments. Sorry if you listen to this. But they just celebrated 40 years of marriage. Nice. And I don't think longevity is necessarily a healthy marriage. I think it's one thing to just stay married legally, but it's another thing to like be committed to one another and really be compatible. Like being compatible means you're willing to struggle with one another, and they do to this day. They flirt openly. Sometimes I have to leave the room. It's gotten worse as I've gotten older, but I love that. It's also very awkward. But you can just see their friends, and they sacrifice for each other, just like you were saying. Sacrifice is so huge. I watched my parents navigate even raising kids. So my dad worked night shift for a while, and my mom was, of course, day shift. And so sometimes they would just be like passing ships in the night, and they didn't enjoy that. That was not good for them. But you know, they were able to be there for us, and that was just a few years. So my mom was able to pick us up from school. She was able to come get us if we needed something. My dad went to our sporting events when he was off work. So it was really good for us in a lot of ways, and they are the kind of couple that makes you want to get married. And I know that because even at their anniversary party last month, you could just see people speaking about their marriage as an example. There were several young couples, especially that I grew up with, who look at them and want to know the answers. Like, how does this work? Yeah. So they still got stuff, but their marriage is beautiful.
You said something that, correct me if I'm wrong, was it your mother worked day shift, your father worked night shift? So career was very big, and then having to balance that with family. Now, knowing you two, just career-oriented individuals, how does that work? And again, not to put your business out there, Lizzie, but you are single, and Tova, you are in a relationship. How you guys balance that, starting with you, Lizzie, you know, having a career and then also desiring a relationship at the same time. How has it been juggling and navigating that?
Well, it's easy when you're super single. Just practically, it is easy. We were talking about the other day, actually, you said something about, you know, would you even have time to date? No, not with the way I live now. But because I'm super single, I can enjoy that. So I don't see, like, the absence of marriage as a loss. I see it as a gain of singleness, right? And that, it hasn't always been like that. And there's some days where, you know, it sucks, to be honest with you. But it's been easier for me to pursue my personal goals, whether that is with education, whether it's with my small business with lettering, whether it's vocally with music. I have time to do those things because I'm on my own. I get to choose how to run my household. I get to choose how to allocate my time. I spend more time with my community group and people from church, or even just friends outside of that, because I'm single and I crave marriage. I want to have kids, but I've come to the point where I trust God with how He's made me, and I think that He really has given me my singleness as a gift, because when I have been in dating relationships, I wasn't pursuing my gifts. I wasn't pursuing my career or anything like that because of my parents. So since a young child, I've seen marriage. They got married at 18 and 19. The ring I'm wearing today, my dad gave to her when she was 13. He was 14. So I always imagined that I would get married young, have kids young. It did not happen. I'm 27. So it's just not something that God has designed for me. But I know that when it does happen, if that's something He's created for me, that I'm going to be a better wife, because I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I know how to run things in my house. I know what I can't run in my house. And it will be easier for me to communicate those things to my prospect.
And I appreciate that. I'm looking more like expectations once you are married, because I feel like there is kind of this double standard with a man when they have a family and kids. It's not like career or family, but I feel like a lot of times with women, when they get married, they have kids, it's either, you know, I've got to stay in the house versus wanting to pursue a career. And I feel like sometimes there's a real tension of a woman who's wanting to pursue her career, but has a family. And sometimes I've heard it before where it's like the career woman will either like look down on the woman who stays at home, or even the woman who stays at home may resent staying at home because she had her own goals and dreams. Like, what are your expectations? Say you get married, say you have kids, and you've got these dreams, but it's like family. And I guess, again, just to be real transparent, so me and Mylena have a daughter. We want to have more kids, but in having more kids, at least one of us is going to have to stay home. It's not going to be possible for us to both be working since we don't have, extended family nearby. So one of us is going to have to stay home. And just to be completely honest, in my mind, it was just she would have to stay home. Like, I'm not even considering me. I guess number one, because my job, the benefits that I have with my job would. But even being by myself, we couldn't support. So I know she's got her own dreams and goals. Because even right now, she's like telling me that if she gets pregnant, she wants to like work it around like her photography and stuff like that. Because as much as we, hate to say it, having a family affects the woman more because she's going to be pregnant. We've got to help put that into consideration. And I know for a lot of women, there's that tension of wanting to have a family and then pursue a career. So how have you even thought about those?
Oh yeah, I have. So I'm certified as a teacher. So I think my story is unique because I feel like my mind is modern businesswoman. But because I'm certified K6, I want to homeschool my babies and a bunch of other babies. Like, I legit want to have like a 15-passenger van made up of my children and several other children and provide them with an awesome education because I know I can and I know I will. But I also want to pursue my small business on the side and pursue music, and that means time. So whoever I'm with needs to be someone who affirms those things in me, who points out my gifted areas, who sharpens them, who makes them better, and I don't want to feel stifled in that way. So I think what would happen is if I got married and then, or even just in a dating relationship, in a courtship relationship, and he was like, yeah, so I expect you to be at home with the kids and I'll go to work. I'm like, Joker? I'm so sorry, but that feels like a box to me. So if you force me into this, I'm not going to want to do it. I want to be modern businesswoman again. But if you with me process that and see the different options, because it's not in the Bible. Well, it is in the Bible in one way. So, like, women care for their children, and it even says, like, they're to stay at home. But I think the context is really important of that. Like, be available to your child, for your family, be a provider for your family in a certain way. And if my family is in the picture for, like, with kids, my business is second priority to that. So if that means I sacrifice more time with that for my family, that's a decision that we make together, because he will have to make sacrifices as well. But if he's not willing to help with the chores or to sit with the kids and hang out or even take them for a day, like if I do homeschool, there's got to be some balance between that. But I'm not going to be forced into it. I just won't do it.
What about you, Tova?
So I definitely still want to have a career as well as raise kids, and this is something Keith, who's right there.
Shout out to Keith helping with the
visuals. We definitely talked about it, and we're definitely on the same page with it. And I think that's something very important to talk about when you're first dating. Like, you need to know what you want first of all, and then if you're not going to agree on that, then that's a big life decision. So I don't know what would happen from that point on with the relationship. If, no sides are willing to yield, it probably won't work out. Or you'll be miserable if, you decide to take the next step in a marriage. But my goal would be to, get married, wait a few years before kids come into the picture. I know I can't plan everything about my life. I've tried and it doesn't work. And then, once kids come, like, hopefully the career I have at that time will be supportive of, like, kids. Like, let's say I'm a professor. I could have my kid in the office. So, fun side note, my mom, she actually brought me to her interview to the job she still has now. She's about to retire. in my little car seat thing. I guess it was nap time for me or something because I wasn't disruptive. But I aspire to that. Like, my mom did it. She was able to make it to my stuff after school. So I just look at it. She can do it, I can do it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Keith, who's in the room, and like I said, shout out to Mr. Keith helping us out. You guys are here because of Keith, and like I said, you are in a relationship. But what was it that attracted you to Keith? What was it about him? I think he said take your time for it.
Right.
That's all the accolades. See how I set you up, Keith? Make sure I crop this one out real quick.
So I have to say, when I first met Keith, I actually thought he was someone else's boyfriend. And he was looking at me like I was crazy. But the funny thing is, when I first met him, I was looking at my friend because I thought, that was her boyfriend. I was like, good choice, because I thought he was super handsome. So I would say first things first, I noticed his looks, his smile for sure. And it's funny, people think we're related because, both of us smile a lot, but we're not related. Yeah, so definitely his physical being attracted me to him. And then over time, since I've gotten to know Keith, I would say his character, how he's able to stay grounded, because I'm the opposite. If something happens, I'm here 0 to 60, and he's pretty much flat, and then eventually he may go up, but he's pretty much flat. And so that, in a way, grounds me as well. And the fact that he is a Christian and that he does strive to be better. We're not perfect, but I do look up to him. I admire him, how he's able to walk this Christian life.
Now, even though Lizzie is not in a relationship, are you, and again, the assumptions that we make, is there a list in your mind of qualifications that guys have to meet? Please do tell.
Well, I'll be very blunt.
Go ahead.
And I may have to apologize to you for this later. I have a note in my phone, and it says, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Oh, please.
Because I just need that. Because I've dated, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is nice. It's cool to have a companion. He's handsome. He makes me laugh. But then there's a lot of dysfunction. And so I need it to be super clear for me. Can I see this, marriage with this man? Because if I can't see marriage with this man, dating is just it's off the table. Because he can get to know me in a friendship. Yeah. If he really wants to get to know me, he's going to figure out how to hang out with me and my friends, how to come to church with me, or whatever it is. But I don't play. So, yeah, my list, first of all, he has to be submitted to God.
Okay.
And when I say God, I mean God, Father, Son, Spirit. Must believe. Theology, theology is very important to me. I'm very careful about that because I think there's being equally yoked, which just means you're with somebody that you agree in your belief systems with. But kids ask crazy questions. And I plan to have children, whether it's biological or foster or adoptive, whatever it is, they ask crazy questions. And this is coming from a 5th grade teacher who talks to kids all the time. So I want to know that we're on the same page when we answer questions, and it doesn't mean that we've broken down every single theological point. It just means that we can come to a point where if it's a first-handed issue, we're together on it. But if it's a second-handed issue that doesn't really make a difference one way or the other, we're cool. It's fine to disagree. So that's one. I must be attracted to him. So physique is important. I have learned that it's not shallow to turn them down. So, in your marriage, I'm just going to be blunt again. God created sex. So, if you look like a bookshelf to me, it's just not going to work.
So, if you square, nope.
No, unless the Lord changes my heart, which is possible. but I do think that's important. I want us to have similar interests where we don't necessarily have to do the same things, but I can at least go alongside him in what he really likes to do, and he can at least come beside me in whatever I want to do. And also, it's very important to me that he loves my family, that has a heart for them. So, you know, my dad asked me, he's like, so baby, I'm going to need you to have a man around this Christmas to help with the Christmas decorations, to put them up in the attic, take them down. Like, I'm so sorry, but I'll help you. So I want somebody that I don't have to ask, hey, will you go please help my dad? But somebody who's like, hey, doesn't your dad pull down the decorations around this time of the year? I think I'm going to go hang out with him and help him out. Or somebody that can have a conversation with my brother and love my brother, and somebody who serves my mom in the kitchen. Those are things that are really important to me and that are intrinsically important to him, that I don't have to explain it, but that he just has such a heart to do it, that he'll just do it.
You said something that I picked up on. You said your father, I'm assuming he was joking, saying that you'd have to have somebody
Maybe
by Christmas, and you did reveal your age. How much pressure is there to, like, find someone, get married, external pressures, and how do you deal with those pressures? Even internal pressures that you put on yourself. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's real out here in these streets. Actually, I've really enjoyed my singleness, and I've gotten to the point where I don't care about my age. That's why I shared it, because I'm cool with it. My parents, for a little while, they were, expecting me. Every time I was in a dating relationship, they expected it to become a marriage. And I honestly, that's the only reason I date. So that was kind of on the table. But they were upset when we would break up, even if I knew it was the right thing to do. And that's actually changed. My parents have become really accepting and encouraging to me to just take my time. And I've explained I would rather be content and single rather than rush into a marriage relationship that isn't of God or isn't necessary, right? So, like, I heard you say in a previous podcast that your marriage isn't about happiness, it's about holiness. Well, right now, I'm more holy in my singleness. And I know that because if I weren't, God, who loves me and is jealous for me, would have gotten me married, right? And I think there's a time when that will come. I really do believe that. But my pressure comes from my extended family. So I just went to my parents' anniversary party, and my aunt pulls me to the side and she goes, so when are you going to start developing an interest in men? Okay, well, it's not that simple. I like men, but I'm also not going to force myself to get married or to bring a man into our family, because I'm complete. I am whole. I am equally woman as all the other women who are married. I'm equally woman. And if God blesses me with a marriage, he will. And if he blesses me with singleness, he will. And it's fine. But I'm done. I'm good. Unless God says more. And I feel like society says no to that unless you are, like, chasing your career as a woman. And that's been interesting. But I've actually answered very honestly, even to my aunt and other family members who have expected me to bring someone home for a while. It's just not what God has for me right now, and I trust him. So and again, you were saying that you're blunt, and I'm kind of blunt myself, where I feel as if once you're, like, out of college, like, your pool just, like, shrinks. Yeah, significantly.
So much.
Especially when you're an elementary school teacher who pretty much only interacts with women.
Yeah. So even at work and then at church, so I feel like there's that pressure there where, especially as people who are believers, it's like your only option is the church unless you're, like, intentionally going outside of your way. Like, I don't know if you've ever, like, done, like, any of those website things. Have you?
No.
I don't want to put you on blast.
No, you can. Haven't? I'm okay. No, I haven't. I've thought about it, but it's not me. Like, I think I would perform, right? Like, not intentionally, but when you're in an interview with somebody, even with cameras in the room, like, you perform. And so for me, And several of my girlfriends have said I'm crazy for this, but I really honestly just want to skip dating. Like, I could go without it. Because what I want to do is be in a genuine friendship with a guy in a group, and then, you know, if he develops an interest, courtship. So I would really like to do a formal courtship where he is, like, from day one, hey, look, I've been watching you for years. We're good friends. Here are the reasons that I want to pursue you for marriage, and I would like to start now. Can I meet your family? Can we have some real conversations? Can we just be clear about this? And then if it's not on the table, we're going to take it off the table. So we discover it quickly. And then I want to date forever. Like, I want to spend my life with that person and enjoy them and, you know, flirt and all of those things, but it's bad for my heart otherwise. And so that's the route I want to go. But
I hear you. And so, Tova, you're in a unique position too, but I'm sure there's pressures on your end. And I'll be completely honest. So I saw your Instagram, or not Instagram, Facebook post, and you were just talking about how you were angry at God and just having just a really candid moment on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so the whole time I'm reading it, I don't know where you're going with it, but I'm thinking you're upset at an individual who we were nameless, but you were talking about something as far as career-wise, but at the end of the day, you were talking about the lesson that you were learning was patience, you know. And so how has that been dealing with those pressures, either external or internal, on you are in a relationship but wanting to, I guess, go to the next step and having to be patient in that? How have you navigated that?
Yeah, so just to give a little context, had a situation where I basically needed to be delivered from it. I have to be a little discreet about everything. But I was waiting for some tangible thing to come my way so that I could be delivered from that situation. And, you know, people were telling me this was going to come my way, like, several times. And, you know, soon would happen, nothing. And so, long story short, I got tired of waiting, and I just flipped out on God, because I was like, you know, you have the power to make this happen, and this whole time you've been telling me it's going to happen. Wait. And I did, and it was like up to that point of me getting mad, like I was out of time. I needed to make a move. And so, you know, if I would have waited just a little bit longer, I wouldn't have had him gotten mad at God, because, like, I ended up checking my email later after getting mad, and I had what I needed. And so what's interesting about that situation is, you know, it makes me think about, you know, me waiting to be engaged. I'll be blunt. It's not been easy, especially when I see other people who, you know, I've gone to school with or not gone to school with, and they've been in a shorter, like, dating span, and they're already married, and it's like I'm not even, like, engaged yet. So back to this whole comparison thing. So my situation with you know, me getting angry with God, that situation, and, you know, if I'd have just waited a little bit longer, I would have seen God work. Helps me be a little bit more patient with this whole engagement, waiting for it to happen, because it's like, you know, if I can wait for that to happen, I can wait, you know, for this to happen. But it's not easy. Especially, you know, like, Keith and I were talking, and I asked him, like, do people ask you, like, you know, when are you going to propose to Tova? And he said, and I agree, that it's usually, you know, no, it's usually me. I'm the one who's being asked. And I think it's funny because it's like, I don't have the power to make that happen. So, like, why am I being asked? Like, I know the answer to that. But yeah, I've been in the grocery store, and people I know will be like, oh, so when are you going to get married? Or, you know, oh, now you've graduated and all that. What's next? Like, when are you going to get married? And then, like, even at work, people are like, they're looking at my finger, like, after the winter break, and they're like, oh, you know, he hasn't proposed yet. So it's like, yeah.
I feel like that would be so hard, because even, so from my perspective, if I talk to a guy and smile There are women who are like, so he's cute. Like, I just met him. But that happens with kids too. Like, as soon as you get married, people are like, so when are you gonna have kids? And then you have the first child, and people are like, oh, so when are you gonna have another one? And I feel like that can even speak to discontentment in our lives, right? Where it's easier to focus on other people a lot of the time than what's going on internally. But also, we like to be entertained by each other. Like, it's entertaining to watch a relationship grow and develop. It's entertaining to watch kids grow up. But I feel for you, because I see people ask you, and I feel like, oh man, I would hate that so much. But you're very fortunate, Keith.
No, but it's such a real thing, because just harping off what you said, me and Mylena would see so many other people get married before us, and we would have to, because we were paying out of pocket, and so we would see people who were together less time than us, married before us, and we're like, geez, what's going on? But it really hit home when we were married, and everybody would get pregnant. And we were trying to do, let's try to wait, some time, and I could definitely feel the pressure building for Mylena. And again, just not wanting to stereotype, but I do feel like it is a huge pressure for women, even just thinking just biologically, and having all those pressures that are on you, because as a man, it's not as much of a pressure for us, we want to have kids, but I can wait. But for a woman, that's constantly, on her mind. And like you said, once we do have kids, now it's like, oh, when's the next one? So, and I don't necessarily want to call it discontent, but it's, I guess it is. But making sure that not being influenced by the outside, letting the outside influence your relationship, and that does take some, discipline, in not having that, where you guys you can't let somebody else force you to do with something that you're not ready there and then. So yeah, like I said, I can definitely understand and relate to the pressures that you guys have to face. And I guess even that kind of brings me to gender roles, where it does seem, some, what's the word? There's double standards and things like that. But what are your thoughts on gender roles as it goes? I was joking with Lizzie that there's someone that we know who they are married, but like the wife drives them everywhere. And so from my vantage point, it's like, just naturally speaking, it's something you as a man you're supposed to do, but this doesn't make him any less of a man. But I think gender roles are something that either we don't talk, we don't clarify, but it's a reality, and I didn't know what you guys thought, because navigating life and being in relationships, are there gender roles? If there are gender roles, what are they? Are they universal? Is it just cultural? What are your thoughts and ideas? And I think I'll give you another example. I was talking with Lizzie before you guys came in, and again, I don't mean to put your business out, Lizzie, but just this idea of a child coming back home. Mm-hmm. And as a father who is raising a daughter, it's like, I want to raise an adult at 18. You get out, if you're going to college, go to college. But after that, I want you to be a self-sufficient, adult. But if the point in time comes where you have to come back home, where you've exhausted all your options, I feel like I'd be more accepting of my daughter coming back than if I had a son. I'd, welcome her with open arms, but not as much as my son. And I don't know if that necessarily speaks to gender roles per se, but I guess in a sense where I would be more protective over my daughter than my son. But just what are your guys' thoughts on gender roles, if there are if they exist, if they do, what are the distinctions, and how do we make those distinctions between gender roles?
I think they do exist. Like, there's like a physical barrier to some things. Like the woman, she's gonna have to, if y'all want kids, she's gonna be the one that has the baby. Essentially, that's one role. And then as far as like the provider piece, like I think it falls on the man to like be the one who's, making sure the family is taken care of. That's not to say that the woman is not contributing, is not a helpmate, because like my ideal marriage, both will be contributing to the income. I didn't say this earlier, but if it seems better, like, I would be willing to be a stay-at-home mom, but temporarily. I don't think, just the way that I'm wired, like, I don't think I'd want to be in that situation for long. At least, like, let the kids get to grade school and then go back. So take a break, I guess you could say. If it's really a break, it's probably not. Yeah, I just had a brain fart. Not gonna lie, to be real.
So would you say, like, gender roles only would exist within the family? So as you guys, you're not married, do gender roles exist outside of family, or no? And that's something that I'm wrestling with too, because even when because I even remember Pastor Jerome was, like, speaking on, like, masculinity and things like that. And even when we look in scripture, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, the times where you see gender roles, you know, husbands love your wives, wives submit to your husbands, those type of things, those are seen in the paradigm of a marriage and a family unit. But is the marriage what defines being a man and being a woman, just that? Because outside of that, what determines, you know, masculinity, femininity, you know, all these things outside of that? And in scripture, I haven't yet to find that clearly defined. So it's something that I'm still, like, wrestling with, but I was just curious on your thoughts. So would you say that these gender roles that you're speaking of, do they only exist within that marriage and family paradigm, or do they exist outside of that?
If you count courting, I think in a way, yes. Because you look, like, at several stories, like, okay, like Boaz, like, Ruth, you know, made it known, like, you know, hey, here I am. But he ultimately, you know, courted her, did that process to get them married. So I guess in that sense, like, I think, like, the whole courtship process, the man pursuing the woman, you know, that's a role in itself.
Okay, yeah, pursuing the guy, pursuing the woman, but outside of even courting in that, because that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what defines, especially in the society that we live in, where we, you know, we have to have the issues of, like, transgenderism and things like that. Like, how do we define these roles? And it's like, so it seems so innate, but there is some complexity to it, you know, that we would have to admit, especially those who you know, hold to scripture, that it's not as black and white. So outside of courting, outside of marriage, and like I said, I want to say yes, that I think men as a society, we should, and the principle should be to look out for, you know, women. Like, I remember one time, me and my Lena were taking pictures, and the person who was taking it was my friend's wife. And so she had her kid with her, and so me and Mylena went to the car, and then she was going into her car. But then I saw some strange dude approaching her, and I felt the need to go and, like, say, yo, what's going on? Don't come up with a woman with her back turned, putting a kid in a car. I felt that it was my responsibility to go and look out for her. Now, I wasn't going to send Mylena to go do that, but it's like, is it that primitive, you know, or is there, you know, some more nuance to it? But I do agree. I just haven't been able to find it and support it from scripture is all that I'm saying, because I think the basic, you know, principle for a man, provide and protect, you know, but I think a woman can provide and protect too. So it's like, maybe to a lesser extent, but how are we defining these roles and whatnot? What are your thoughts, Lizzie?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say gender roles exist, for sure. And I think they're even more complex in 2019. Expressly. Like, I think it's probably been around for centuries, but we're talking about it loudly in 2019. But as far as in scripture, I was just thinking in Proverbs 31, specifically, like, you see a businesswoman, you see a woman who's taking care of her house, you see that she's nurturing, you see that she's careful about her appearance and make sure that her family's getting what they need. So I think with the, like, entrepreneurial mindset, you see that in the Proverbs 31 woman. And I'm not saying that every single woman needs to be an entrepreneur, but usually when you think of an entrepreneur or a business person, you think of a man. Mm-hmm. So I think that's interesting to consider. But outside, you know, I would hope that someone would warn me if I were at a gas station. I wouldn't care so much if a woman approached me, but whenever I pump gas, I'm looking around the whole time. I'm trying to see if there's somebody coming at me. If it's a man, I'm going to be much more alert than if it's a woman. Yeah. And I think that ties into the conversation. Even if the person looks like a man or looks like a woman, my perception of them is going to determine how I respond to that. But yeah, I don't really have examples of that either, besides it's something to think about. I might need a week.
No, and like I said, it's something that I'm still challenged with and still trying to think through myself, so I was curious of the opinions of other people. But like I said, I think just some basic ones are, you know, protecting, you know, and providing. And I do think, you know, even in courtship, that's really huge. And again, I don't know if I can prove this scripturally, but I think it is both parties' responsibility, but primarily the man, to try to protect the purity of the woman that he is courting. And so, especially within Christian circles, like there's a huge emphasis on purity, a huge emphasis on like fleeing temptation and doing these things. And coming out of that Christian, you know, bubble, I feel like a lot of the conversations on purity are mainly directed towards men. You know, men struggling with whatever their struggle is. But as I've gone through life, even having conversations with Mylena, I feel like it's equally as a struggle for women as well, you know, and it's something that, you know, we kind of ignore. But if you probably were to look at the statistics, they're probably just as high with men, whether it be pornography, whether it be whatever the case may be, that is just as high. And so why, I guess, number one, why do you think it's such a conversation when we talk about lust? It's geared mainly towards men, and I guess in my experience, women aren't given the same amount of attention when we talk about this topic of lust.
That's a good question.
Who wants to go first?
I was just trying to think, like, you know, society's different views of, like, you know, a man who's promiscuous versus a woman, like what she's called and, you know, what he's called. Like, he's a player. I'm just going to put it out there. She's a slut or whatever. So I was wondering if the two are kind of related, like, you know, like guys, it's because like it's like a natural thing, like they're gonna want, you know, all these women, like it's okay, like they're the ones that are gonna be lusting. The women, you know, they shouldn't be, because there's such a negative stipulation on her being promiscuous, like it's just like shut off, like that's not even an option for you. Maybe, I don't know.
I think it has a lot to do with patriarchy, honestly. Because if you have always, like, from America's beginning, right? So America's been a messy place since day one, still waiting for it to be great. Anyway, so you see, like, women portrayed as this meek and mild, which is what, you know, it's wonderful. Those are great qualities. But, like, we have the absence of a libido, right? That's not true. The Lord also gave women a libido. He also gave them a voice and a backbone and ideas. And for a long time in Western culture, it's been shut down, where, you know, it took a new law. Like, it took women's suffrage for women to be able to work. That wasn't a thing for men. It was never men's suffrage. It was something particular to women. And even now, you have issues where men and women are doing the same jobs, but men are being paid more for them. So where men are seen as strong for promiscuity, women are seen as trash for promiscuity. And I do think that's flipping around a little bit, because you see a lot of times celebrities even, like, they look powerful. Like, these women look powerful. They look sexy with their promiscuity, but it's still not. Like, it's still brokenness. It's still setting us up for failure ultimately, because our minds are so set on our sex lives that we ignore what God created it to be. So, like, heterosexuality, homosexuality, transgender, these are all things that need to be talked about, and in a loving way. but none of them are the focus. None of them should be the focus. If you're a Christian, it doesn't matter if you identify with any of those categories because God loves you no matter what. So if that's the argument, like, our focus should be purely on him, which is why I think it goes back to the original question about marriage and singleness and relationships. It's not about marriage and singleness. Those are constructs for a relationship, which God has designed for us to have with him in unity. So...
No, and like I said, I appreciate that, and to try to ignore the conversation, I think is a disservice, because it is something that does need to be talked about, and I think that's possibly one of the things that me and like Mylena clicked on, where we could be open about our own struggles with each other, because it's something, especially as a man, that you think it's just the guys who are talking about sex and have that on their mind, but it's like something that goes on with women, and I think, I'm gonna be honest, I think women mature at a higher rate than men, so I feel like they're talking about it, more than us as guys do. And I feel like sometimes, again, going back to double standards, where they work in both reverses, where I think sometimes we neglect women in those areas because we think, again, we have that idea, like, it's so prude, right, to think that a woman is thinking these things, that we don't take proper time to minister to the woman as well in those areas when it comes to lust. But
can I speak to that again?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think it's important for, like, our brothers to know, when we get into groups of just women, especially if we're talking about like hard topics, we talk about our issues with that. We talk about our lust. We talk about our addictions to porn. We talk about our addictions to Netflix and how it's really difficult because you just thought the show looked interesting and you clicked play and then you couldn't look away because it was just fascinating, right? Like, even shows like Scandal or Game of Thrones or any of these shows that, they are interesting. They have interesting plots. They're well done. The production is awesome. The music is good. It's right there. It'll just play the next episode without you having to do anything. That's what we talk about in our circles together. And we talk about other stuff as well. Like, of course, we talk about, clothes if we're interested in clothes. But our focus, and you can correct me if you think this is different, but I would say we spend most of our time talking about relationships. So... brothers, help us out. Pray for us. Be careful not to ask us detailed questions in small groups. But, like, it's something I think in a group setting, I think is a beautiful thing to discuss. But I wouldn't have that conversation one-on-one with a girl, because then she's going to be like, oh my God, what's happening? And also you want to protect both of your hearts in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just had a couple more things before we wrapped up. So both of you guys have been in relationships, are currently in relationships. And like I said, the title of the podcast is You're Doing It Wrong. And just wanted to be open and honest about the relationships you've been in and either something that you've done wrong and learned from. I'm trying to think. I wanted to start it off real quick. One of the things with me and Mylena that I've done and still have been guilty of is she always makes this comparison when we were, I guess, courting or dating, just being very intentional. And I think especially during those times of courting, we let the person see us at our best. We want to put our best foot forward, and that was definitely the case. And then once you get married, I've just been guilty of just being very lax in that and not being as attentive, taking her for granted, and it's something that I still constantly struggle with. So I want to say that I've learned from it, but I think that's the trap that you fall into, especially when you are courting, and eventually the person will get to see you on your bad days. But it's different when you waking up day in and day out to the next person. You truly get to see them, the highs and the lows. So that's definitely something that I have done wrong in relationship, where I've always desired, even before I was a Christian, just being a husband and a father. Those are things that I've always desired. And I think God is going to hold me accountable more for those things than, any amount of degrees or ministry-related work that I do, because I think my first ministry and priority is to my family, and sometimes it's easy to take for granted those who are closest to you. So that's definitely something that I've done wrong, and I'm trying to learn from. But what about you guys?
I'll go. Okay. So I would say in my past relationships, I've had a hard time figuring out what girlfriend is supposed to be like. I understand singleness and I understand friends and I understand like the models of marriage that I've seen, but I don't understand girlfriend. So, and I think that's still something that I have to process. And again, right now it's not an issue, but like trying to assume that my boyfriend or counterpart will, lead me in a certain way that I've seen husbands lead their wives, but it's not happening. Like, it might not be appropriate for him to do that, but I just can't compute it. Like, I just don't get it. It's a big gray area for me, and it's kind of scary. So even in my next relationship, fair warning here, but it will be something I have a lot of questions about. So, in those past relationships, they tanked, right? And I think part of it was probably because I had these unfair expectations, and even didn't communicate them. It was just like they were there, but hidden away. And I would say, again, with the communication part, there have been times where I've been asked, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Nothing." "What's wrong?" "I can tell you're upset." "Nothing's wrong." 3 hours later, and I'm like, "You were supposed to know what it was." Now I'm much more direct. "What's wrong?" "Oh, I'll tell you what's wrong."
That's Tova cut her eyes at Keith.
Yeah, it's real, but yeah, those two things.
What about you?
It's funny. I do that. I'm not gonna lie.
You keep shaking his head over there.
It's hard not to do it.
Yeah. I would say one thing I did in my past relationships, which I think I've gotten over it, or at least I have a different perspective about it now. Checkboxing. So like, like the last relationship I was in before this one, one thing I was like, okay, he's a Christian. Check. But then it's like everything else, like, I guess I was kind of ignoring. I don't know how to best put it. The long story short is there was a compatibility issue, and I was still stuck on, well, he's a Christian, he'll change, like, God will change him, this will work. But it was like I was seeing a lot of red flags, and, I would pray on them. I'd be like, God, like, should I be paying attention to this? Or, like, if it's not really a big issue, like, let the red flags, like, go away. And they didn't go away. And it basically got to the point that, God was trying to show me you don't need to be in this relationship. And then, like, he just shut the door. So
he's good like that, right?
Yeah, he is. So, and that's not the first time that's happened. I've been in other relationships, too, where it just gets to that point where it's like, God's like, you don't need to be in this relationship. And then he just shuts the door. So I'm thankful for that. And, now I'm looking, like, for other things, like how Keith and I are able to get through conflict. Because, one thing with my parents, like, yeah, they would have, arguments and everything, but I didn't really see how that conflict resolution worked, which probably, me being a child, that's not really for me to see. But, when it came down to, Keith and I having our first fights, like, I thought it was like no man's land. Like, you don't fight, you don't argue, like, that's a bad thing. That's a bad sign in your relationship. And so after talking with other couples, I realized, like, that is actually okay, and what's healthy is how you get past the fight. So
no, but I really appreciate you guys sharing. Number one, just being willing and open to have a candid conversation like that, because like I said, it's you're being vulnerable. You're just opening yourself and just having real conflicts, because you're still waiting for engagement. You're still waiting. So these are things that you're currently fighting and dealing with. And even someone who is married, it's like, I think we believe once we get married, like, everything, like, ceases. Like, all the issues that we had before, and I truly believe it just gets magnified, because you're truly going to be in a relationship where you have to love someone as Christ loved. And that's why I wanted to ask that initial question, like, why is this topic of relationship so important? Because if you don't come from this biblical basis, it's like as soon as someone does something, oops, I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. But if your foundation is God's love for you and you realize all the things that you've done and he's saying, I'm not going anywhere, that's how you reflect what Christ's relationship with the church. That, going back to what you said when you had quoted me, where I said marriage is not about your happiness, it's about your holiness. I'm not saying that you're not going to be happy,
right,
but you're not going to be happy 24/7. In those moments when you are angry, and it's going to happen at your spouse, when they do things that just irk your nerves. And I think God designs it that way where, I'm a pretty low-key person, but like Mylena knows the right buttons to like push, to like set me off. And it's like, in those moments, am I going to truly show patience? Am I going to show grace? Am I going to love her? And same for her. Like, I know I push her buttons. I don't want to make this seem like a one-sided thing. And in those moments, she, has to truly love me as Christ, loved. And so coming from that is important, because if not, then Keith said something that was just so profound, where he's like, my examples of marriage was from TV. And that's what you see, where it's like, as real as it is, it's like, dang, that's kind of like, I hate to say this, pitiful, where it's like our examples of marriage are coming from TV, especially, us in, the African American community, where it's just such a little representation of what a family unit is, when it's like, no, that can't be your basis. Those are some great, the Cosby's or whatever you want to look at it and say, man, that was, great relationship, but that if that's your standard, then that's not going to sustain you. Right. It's got to be what Christ has done for us to sustain us. But like I said, I definitely thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation with you guys. But I have one last question, because as someone who has a daughter and has a lot of female friends, I know how important that relationship is with the daughter and her father. What advice could you guys give me as I, raise a woman?
That's a great question.
Go to her events, support her.
Go to her events.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree. Spend time with her, affirm her, make sure that she knows she's beautiful, make sure that she knows you love her, that you think she's beautiful. But I think those two things are major.
Cool. Now, did you guys have any questions for me or for each other or anything before we wrap up? Nope. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, like I said, I appreciate you guys coming through and having this conversation, and thank you, Keith, for challenging me and saying, hey, you shouldn't have a conversation about relationships without having ladies on the podcast. So again, thank you guys so much. Next month, I don't know what I'm going to do. I want to have Jamel and Elder Lee come on and talk about fatherhood. So I think that would be dope. So Jamel just had a son, and Elder Lee's got like 15 kids or something like that. Got a lot of kids. But just someone who, truly loves his family and provides and protects his family. Just wanted to have a conversation with them. So hopefully that can happen. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we are
Yo,
out.
my world don't stop when the beats commence. Said I'm climbing up this ladder just to get over this fence and run far away from the games people play. In this melancholy modern day music, Malay, touche. Pussycats with lives to spare that kick in your heart, nice as hell. Yeah, be aware, beware. I hate to see you less a liver or worse. Polar bear, winter time, catch the river. Now that's cold, and like that, now that's old. Didn't buy the last copy of this, now that's old. It's the pepper on your salt, my dudes, I grind it out. And the answer to the questions of life, I find it out with that stress. I walk with access, be he who Max says, with simple blackness. Cause in the end, God bless us, which is so profound. So I stick to my guns. Urban soul be the sound, and y'all doing it wrong.
Got me walking out.